Good afternoon. It is 1:07 p.m. on Tuesday, November 21st, 2023, and I am calling this meeting, special meeting of the Arizona Civil Rights Advisory Board to order. I am Chairman of the Board, Karen Hartman-Tellez. The Civil Rights Advisory Board called this meeting due to deep concerns about the rise in hate crimes and about anti-Semitic incidents statewide, including those recently on college campuses. We are welcoming several presenters today who will address the topic of anti-Semitism in the community and also on college campuses. Before we hear from our presenters, I would like to invite the Attorney General, who is present with us, to address the board.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to begin by extending my sincere thanks to the Arizona Civil Rights Advisory Board, the board chair, and to everyone who is gathered here and on the Zoom as well today. Your presence, especially considering the short notice, is a testament to the gravity of the issue that we are going to discuss today and our collective dedication to addressing it. I asked the board to call this emergency meeting because of the pressing nature of this issue and because hate and anti-Semitism are clearly on the rise in Arizona and across the country. The responsiveness of this meeting, it reflects our shared commitment to combating hate-based crimes and anti-Semitism in our communities. Recently, we have witnessed a deeply concerning and unacceptable rise in such incidents in Arizona and nationwide, ranging from harassment to threats of violence. These are not just attacks on the Jewish community, but they are an affront to the values that we uphold as Arizonans and Americans. And of course, we are aware of the deeply disturbing episode targeting Jewish students at ASU last week, which we condemn in the strongest terms. As Attorney General, I want to reaffirm my office's unwavering commitment to protecting the safety and dignity of all Arizonans. We are monitoring these situations closely and are prepared to prosecute criminal acts to the fullest extent of the law. Hatred has no place in our state, and we stand, all of us stand against those who seek to divide us with their bigotry. The increase in anti-Semitism and other hate-based incidents, not only in Arizona but across the nation, is a call to action for each and every one of us. It requires us to speak out and to speak up, ensuring a safe and inclusive environment for all of us. We recognize and defend the right to free speech, even when it involves ideas that we may personally find objectionable. However, it is crucial to distinguish between protected speech and criminal acts of violence and threats. So let me be clear. Physical attacks and threats of imminent violence are not protected forms of speech. They are criminal acts and they will be prosecuted. And let me be clear, we also condemn in the strongest possible terms acts of hatred and violence against all people, whether they be Jewish, Arab, Muslim, gay, or transgender. Hatred and violence targeted at anyone for who they are is unequivocally wrong. And I urge the public to report any such incident to my office or to local law enforcement authorities. Diversity, inclusivity, and mutual respect are the cornerstones of our society. acts of hatred and bigotry against any group undermine these fundamental values. We must stand together in the fight against anti-Semitism and all forms of hate-based violence. These are not just attacks on specific communities, they are attacks on the very fabric of our society. So thank you once again for your commitment. I really want to again thank the chair and this board for coming together today on an emergency basis so that we can work to uphold the values of our state and to ensure a safe, respectful, and inclusive Arizona for all. So thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Attorney General. All right. As mentioned, we have community presenters here today. They're on the agenda. 4 were listed. Unfortunately, the representative of the Phoenix Police Department was not able to be here today, but we do have 3 of our presenters here today. We will, the presenters will each have 10 minutes to present to the board. And first on our list is Rabbi Bonnie Sharfman from the Jewish Community Relations Council.
General Mays, Chairperson Ross, Chairman of the Civil Rights Advisory Board. I'm Rabbi Bonnie Sharfman. I'm a rabbi at a local synagogue, Congregation Tehillah, Executive Committee member of the Jewish Community Relations Council, past president, immediate past president of the Board of Rabbis of Greater Phoenix, and current vice president of the Arizona Faith Network, which tries to bring us all together. What I want to do with my few minutes today is to try to provide a framework for discussion and subsequent action to protect the Jewish community here in Arizona, and I appreciate so greatly your efforts to protect civil rights. Anti-Semitism is not new. It's the world's oldest hatred. Anti-Semitism has often been the canary in the coal mine of a society. We don't want that to happen here. One of our most cherished rights as Americans is the right to freely practice our religion. For Jews and for non-Jews alike, houses of worship are sacred institutions where community members come together to pray, to be inspired, to educate our children in values that are the backbone of our society, as Jewish people have done for thousands of years. And today, in my community and in other vulnerable communities, some may bow their heads in prayer, while others cast their eyes in the direction of the entrances and the exits, watchful of their fellow worshipers' safety, an environment that usurps the sense of security that all should experience when attending their houses of worship. Threats and actual acts of terrorism by those who would seek to do us harm have risen by over 300% in recent years, and even more so have surged globally since October 7th, even as most are not reported. The American Jewish Community reports that up to 79% of anti-Semitic harassment is never divulged because of obstacles that deter Jewish victims, especially high school and college youth, from speaking out. Why? With social media and evolving technologies, students, staff, and Jewish professionals alike are afraid of being doxxed and targeted for more harassment by being willing to come forward as witnessing anti-Semitic attacks. It's nearly impossible, as you well know, to report anonymously if one wants an investigation with actual results and repercussions. So I'll be sharing the actual statistics to our friends at the ADL. Now, some might argue that the rise in anti-Semitism is due to the current war between Israel and Hamas, which began on October 7th. However, anti-Semitism has been rising in Arizona long before that. And while there is certainly much concern with the Middle East, at issue today is protecting the local Jewish community. Now, not long ago, only the biggest and most urban synagogues had guards. Today, it's difficult to find a Jewish facility without one. And if you've visited the Jewish Community Center in Scottsdale, you'll note how tightly that building is locked down and how limited the egress is. And by the way, the facility is heavily used also by many not connected to the Jewish community. And you'll find that level of security in you won't find that level of security in most other non-Jewish community spaces in Arizona, nor do you need to, but we need it in our buildings. The Jewish community is proud but afraid, and there's a pervasive sense of being alone. Synagogues and Jewish businesses find themselves graffitied with swastikas. Bomb threats and swatting incidents disrupt our most holy worship services. Does everyone know what swatting is? Swatting is calling in fake bomb threats. So it disrupts, takes the local law enforcement away from where they need to be, and tears apart basically the people who are in a building at the time it's happening, wastes the time of law enforcement, and accomplishes nothing except for fear. So just this month, the FBI tracked down and arrested a man making terrible, terrible threats to one of my colleagues, Rabbi Andy Green of Congregation North Zion in Scottsdale. And to any Jew he claimed he would encounter along the way, or so he was quoted as having said. People are afraid to go out wearing any sort of Jewish religious symbols or jewelry. I took this off when I parked my car and walked downtown today. I don't really think I was going to be attacked. I didn't want to chance it. I wanted to make sure I could come here and meet all of you today. Some are taking down the sacred mezuzahs from our home's doorposts because they're afraid of identifying the household's residents as Jews. I'm wearing this, as are many other Jews in my community, this blue ribbon, to remember the 240 hostages still being held in captivity by Hamas. And the world is not crying out. It's unsettling that many college campuses have become breeding grounds for anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiments and hateful actions present for many years now, but that have intensified since the massacre of Israelis by Hamas on October 7th. Social media has been filled with tremendous amounts of information, some good, some barely nuanced misinformation, some ill-informed or even more nefarious in intent, fueled by a naive and biased understanding of the Israeli-Hamas conflict and its background. And when I was young, I well remember the chants of children, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." I could not disagree more. I know that words do hurt, and I believe that you know that words hurt. And that hurt goes deep, and that hurt is more than words, more than free speech. And as Attorney General Mays said, he said it better than I will, like that. It runs deep. It's all too real, and it can lead to tragedy. It's not protected speech. You'll hear from ASU as to the situation students are experiencing on campus. And oftentimes on campuses, Hamas is conflated with Palestinians, but by Hamas's own explanation, they do not represent the Palestinians. They torture Palestinians. Hamas shares no values with any Western academic institution with an ideology that's antithetical to the values that we hold dear. And most, if not all, synagogues here have responded to the rise in anti-Semitism by adding an additional security guard or guards beyond the longstanding practice since the Gulf War, basically, out of necessity of hiring off-duty police for our Sabbath services. And you all know there are not enough police officers in this state right now to go around. There are not enough FBI agents to go around. We hire off-duty police or private security for our Sabbath services, for other holy days when our religious schools and preschools are in session, when our rabbis teach classes and we gather for social events, for bar and bat mitzvahs, for weddings, funerals that are held in synagogues and other life cycle events. The cost of extra off-duty police and private security, if we're able to contract with them, and many times we are not, is astronomical. However, that security is necessary. Without armed guards, many, if not most, congregants and families feel it is too dangerous to be in our synagogues right now. This is the new normal. Larger synagogues have added bulletproof glass, buzzers, and security cameras. Some participate in lockdown and active shooter drills. Can you imagine doing this with your preschoolers? That's what we have to do. Taking away their innocence much, much too early. Now, one synagogue in Arizona, and this one is outside the Metro Phoenix area, sent an email to its congregation last Friday morning, and the subject line read urgent. The email said that, quote, out of an abundance of caution due to local threats to the Jewish community, all on-site programming is canceled. Worship services will be via Zoom only, unquote. I hope and I pray that this is not the new normal. We need to be together in community, all of us, all of us. Now, while my clergy colleagues and I strive to teach, to inspire, to create meaning, to bring about positive change in people's lives, to care for and minister to the needs around us, to feed the hungry, to change lives, we have recently heard another calling. And that calling is from our brave law enforcement community who risk their lives to secure public spaces and fulfill their obligations to protect the public. Law enforcement has given us clear directives regarding robust protection efforts, such as engaging in active shooter drills and hardening the target that many of the spaces in which we gather are. These worship spaces are public spaces entitled to protection. Fortunately, the government is helping at many levels. The federal government has a security grant system, which many houses of worship, including synagogues, have applied for and received. Now, that grant program has significant limitations for smaller and medium-sized religious communities. It's a reimbursement grant, meaning that houses of worship must first lay out funding for security improvements with no guarantee that reimbursement will be provided. The paperwork is difficult to complete, and oftentimes the required assessment of a TLO, a terrorism liaison officer, is not available. Now, I testified in front of the House and the Senate, various committees on behalf of SB 1713, Arizona's nonprofit security grant program, which has allocated money for grants, particularly for those smaller and mid-sized synagogues and churches and mosques and all religious institutions who cannot meet the burden of applying for the federal grant. And that applies, by the way, to churches and other institutions who are targeted for supporting the LGBTQ community. Now, our state bill appropriated $5 million from the General State Fund in 2024, starting for this exact purpose. And we're appreciative that in light of increased threats, the state has moved up the timeline. My understanding that houses of worship are able to start applying for the Arizona grants soon. And we're appreciative of everything Arizona is doing to support the Jewish community. I want to add my thanks to city, county, state, and federal law enforcement who have acted with great sensitivity and incredible communication with us. We feel the caring from you and from our elected officials and from law enforcement. During the incident with threats against Rabbi Green, which I mentioned a moment ago, it was a special agent in charge of the FBI here in Arizona, Akil Davis, who reached out and personally to keep us informed every step of the way. That was a frightening Sabbath morning. Let me end on a note of optimism. Anti-Semitism is growing and the Jewish community is frightened. That's not optimistic. That's true. However, unlike in many places in the world, and unlike in many eras in history, we know that we do not face this threat alone anymore. State government and law enforcement are on our side, and that's remarkably comforting in these incredibly scary times. Thank you for allowing me to do my job. Thank you for protecting our community. I send blessings to you all.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our list for speakers is the Anti-Defamation League.
Good afternoon, Attorney General Mays, members of the Civil Rights Advisory Board. Thank you for holding this emergency meeting. My name is Sarah Cater, and I am the Community Manager for the Anti-Defamation League of Arizona. ADL is a 110-year organization, started in 1913. Created long before the Holocaust, which many don't realize, created in a time when anti-Semitism was concerning then in this country. And the creation was surely a foreboding reality for what was to come in the next few decades worldwide. Since that time, ADL has grown to work in mainly three pillars: investigate, advocate, and educate. We investigate incidents, we advocate on policy matters, and we educate in our local schools and communities. I'm grateful to be here today, hoping to accomplish several of those pillars. ADL has formally tracked anti-Semitic incidents since 1979. Last year, there was a huge increase in anti-Semitism long before this fall. And we were sounding the alarm about the rise of anti-Semitism in this country through our national audit. And in fact, there was one murder in the audit of anti-Semitism in 2022, one murder in the United States, and it was in Arizona. It was the murder of the professor at the University of Arizona, who wasn't even Jewish, but was perceived to be Jewish. And that is the one murder that we tracked last year. In addition, ADL identified Arizona as one of the top 5 states with extremist candidates running for office last November. So we may be far from the national office, but we are not far from off the radar of what's going on regarding extremism and anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, this has gotten astronomically worse since October 7th. October 7th was the largest loss of Jewish life in the world since the Holocaust. I am the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, and I can tell you, our collective hearts are broken, and we are traumatized. And as Rabbi Sharfman duly mentioned, there are still over 200 hostages missing and being tortured as we speak. At ADL, we knew the weeks and months to follow would be worse in this country, and sadly, that's exactly what we've seen. We are working around the clock to track what is happening, and nationally, we've seen a 316% increase in anti-Semitism since October 7th. In Arizona, during the last few weeks, we've seen an 86% increase over last year. We are seeing harassment, vandalism, and assault, including much activity in high schools and on college campuses. As Rabbi Sharfman also mentioned, there recently was a threat of execution of a local rabbi and all other Jews that this person could reach. ADL was proud to report this threat to the FBI and local law enforcement, and we're so glad that this individual is now in custody. But my God, what world are we living in where this happens? Our college campuses, our Jewish students are frightened, and I know ASU is here and will speak more specifically to their experience. But when Jewish students attend student government meetings where rocks are thrown and they must be escorted by law enforcement, and other students hold signs that say Intifada until victory, which means the murder of Jews and not just in Israel, what does this say about our Arizona community? We must ask ourselves, are Jewish students, and indeed all Jewish people, really safe if they need an escort, if they need a police escort? We understand the differences between protected speech, and at ADL, we do not call for groups to be canceled or events to be canceled. And we thank you for the clear delineation of protected speech. But we all then have an obligation to use our own speech, to condemn hate speech, and to speak out against all that threatens our democracy and justice in our communities. If the Holocaust taught us anything, it's that the law and its agents have immense power. Laws were changed, and lawyers and judges and police were used by the Third Reich to carry out their orders, their mission, and their hate. We cannot let that happen. We will not let that happen, and your actions today help us ensure that it won't. As I walked in the building today, I saw the Israeli flag in the window, and it took my breath away. What a statement to stand with the Jewish people. So we are grateful today for your commitment, and we are with you to continue to offer resources and information to make sure Arizona is no place for hate. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final community speaker is from Hillel Jewish Student Center. We have Taylor Silverman and Ben Griffith here today.
Good afternoon, Attorney General Mays and, hello, Civil Rights Advisory Board. My name is Taylor Silverman, and I am the Assistant Director at Hillel at Arizona State University.
Ben Griffith. I am a student who is a regular attendee of Hillel Jewish Student Center and a big advocate in the Jewish community.
And a phenomenal student leader. He sometimes decides when he wants to use that one. A little bit about Hillel at Arizona State. So Hillel at ASU is a part of the Hillel International movement, serving over 500 campuses across internationally, but we directly work with United States and North America Hillel. And our mission across Hillel is to enrich the lives of Jewish students, undergraduate and graduate students, so they may enrich the Jewish people, Israel, and the world. A lofty goal, and something that we take very seriously at Arizona State, being the largest public institution in the country. There are an estimated 3,500 Jewish students across 4 campuses. Hillel itself has 7 full-time staff, a student leadership board of 20, and offers a variety of cultural, social, and cultural programs for students. We really pride ourselves on being aggressive in our engagement strategy, meaning our building is not just where you can meet us. We should be anywhere, considering how large Arizona State is. So we are at downtown, we are at Polytechnic campus, we're at West. And really students see this as a home away from home. When we open our doors during the beginning of the school year, we call our initiative the First 6 initiatives. There's a lot of data around the first 6 being the pivotal, integral time of will a student find their place on campus? And so we called it the First 6. It's interesting because since October 7th, we've now embarked on a new 6 in which we've talked about securing the Jewish students on campus. And so we quickly pivoted from making sure students were warmly welcomed to ensuring students had a safe space to go on campuses. And so I want to talk a little bit. I know there's a lot of conversation about what happened last Tuesday night. I'm going to speak from the staff perspective, if you will, and then Ben's going to account what it was like to be a student in that meeting room. And so we wrote a few notes as we were reflecting on last week. First of all, I've worked in the Hillel movement for over 7 years, and I think there's a reawakening of students being aware of their Jewish identity. So many would just go about their days and would say, if I need Hillel, I'll go. I know it's there if I need it. There's a real moment of, I need Hillel because that is the place in which I feel safe right now on campus. That's very different than weeks past, because students are actively aware of exactly what Rabbi was saying of my kippah or my Jewish star, and how might someone interact with me if they learn that I'm Jewish. Luckily, there's obviously a piece of this where some would say, well, I'll just take my Jewish star off, right? That is a privilege, we understand that. And yes, that is a very hard decision for someone to say, I must hide that part of my identity. And so last Tuesday night, I would say that there were 3 different pieces that came up for students. They're very different, but it's important to distinguish them as we're explaining them to university administrators and professionals. There's the true being unsafe, right? A rock being thrown and that could have escalated and someone could have been hurt. The feeling unsafe as sitting there in the room and waiting for police to tell us that it is okay to leave. And that real thought process of what does this mean for me as I'm being told it is best for you to stay inside right now. And the feeling uncomfortable, which we at Hillel live in all the time, living in the gray, teaching students to step outside their comfort zones, explore ways in which they maybe didn't engage with people or have conversations or dialogue back home. We live in that all the time, but the being unsafe is something very real that we're experiencing with students, and we're seeing that become much more prevalent as students are reporting issues of anti-Semitism in classes, engaging with clubs and organizations in which they used to feel like they were welcomed and no longer can step foot in those spaces as comfortably. And or in general, we're seeing students attend Hillel services, Friday night dinners, seek staff member support because we know that they are unsure where to turn to. And while we're grateful, we hate for them to feel that way. I want Ben to speak a little bit to how students felt being in that room and what it meant. There were about 40 Jewish students who were invited to sit, so it's just one account, but I think he'll be able to explain a little bit better of what happened in that meeting room and where we're going from here. I will say that university administrators are meeting with our executive director regularly, weekly at this point, to understand where students are. They're open to taking meetings with our student leaders, and which student leaders are taking them up on that to make sure that students are directly expressing their concerns to administrators and student senators. And University Police, Tempe PD, as well as ASU PD have been phenomenal. Our building is manned 9 to 9 to 8 every day, because students, while maybe there isn't a credible threat, feel much more comfortable knowing there is a police on site in the case that anything should present itself. So that is some of the precautions we've been taking, and we're very grateful for university administrators and police on that. They've been very receptive. We are preparing for the anti-Israel groups to present new legislation. That is something that's evolving, that student groups are finding ways to create new coalitions amongst themselves, that many groups have been signing on to create what we would call Students Against Apartheid, and it is now becoming a greater effort amongst progressive student groups, in which many of our Jewish students would love to be a part of some of those spaces, but are unsure how to navigate them. So we are anticipating possible legislation like the one we experienced the other week, but I'll hand it over to Ben to talk to you a little bit more about that.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm Ben Griffith. I'm a student at ASU, and I just want to share a little bit of my experience, particularly last Tuesday, but as overall, just as a Jewish student over the past month and a half. Jewish students like myself deserve to feel safe where they are. We're not asking for special treatment. We want equal treatment. We want to be able to enter these spaces and feel safe in our identity. We shouldn't have to move the area that we celebrate Shabbat to a different location due to security concerns. And we shouldn't have to avoid disclosing locations of fun events, like a Hanukkah party, just for safety. I've been around on campus, I've heard the chants, I've read the signs that are calling for intifada, for violent uprising. I've seen the words genocide, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, war crimes just being thrown around without a care. And I'm not here to debate whether or not those directly are anti-Semitic. I'm just here to tell you how they made me feel. Last Tuesday night, I entered into the undergraduate student government meeting along with 15 other speakers and approximately 20 other Jewish students and an additional group of faculty and staff. I heard the opposition call my friends murderers. I heard more chants for intifada and claims of genocide. I saw signs that invoked Holocaust rhetoric in order to somehow demonize the Israeli people. A friend of mine shared during the meeting about how they wore a shirt that said, "I love being Jewish." As they walked on campus wearing that shirt, they were verbally harassed. As they recounted that event at the undergraduate student government meeting, the opposition laughed. There is audible laughing. If you check their live stream, you can hear it. They should not be laughed at for wanting to wear a shirt that says, "I love being Jewish." During moments of silence during the meeting, we could hear chants from outside of the same rhetoric. And I was not personally able to, but many were able to hear the sound of a rock being thrown at the building. We felt unsafe. I don't know if we truly were unsafe, but we were definitely uncomfortable, and I felt unsafe. With the advice of the police, we decided to remain in place, and eventually were given an escort out the back door and back to Hillel, back to Chabad, and a few back to their dorms. I'm not determined whether or not we truly needed that, but we felt we did, and that shouldn't have to be the case. I shouldn't have to make that choice as a Jewish student. I'm from California. I decided to come to Arizona, to come to ASU to study. I want to be an educator. I'm planning to be a social studies teacher. I came to learn how to do that. I didn't come to be harassed or hear calls for the death of my people. I didn't come to have to decide whether or not I needed a police escort. I'm not asking anyone to decide which words in particular are the ones calling for threats. I'm not asking for a constant police escort or security. I'm just asking that myself and the Jewish students around me, my friends and my family, that we can feel safe here. Thank you.
Would it be okay if we asked,
Absolutely. I
Okay.
think we can do that. And I'm sorry to let you go back to your seats, but I
Could
think
you come- I was gonna-
the Attorney General has questions for you.
Sure, certainly.
So, the gentleman who's just arrived is, Nick Klingerman, and he is the chief of my criminal division, so I wanted him to be here. I wanted you to know that we do have law enforcement here, and I may have him speak to what we're able to do from a law enforcement and prosecution standpoint. But in terms of the event the other night, and I want to preface this by saying I do not think this is a problem just at ASU. I think it's a problem on college campuses across the country. I will share with you that I had a conversation with an attorney general, in an East Coast state just a few days ago, who described to me a very similar set of circumstances that you just described, Ben. And he was frankly very afraid about the outbreak of violence, and really worried about that and what could happen in the future. So I guess my question for both of you is, you both seem to in it, my impression as well, believe that the ASU police did everything they could and did a good job, and ASU's been responsive. On the front end, and what do you think we all can be doing and universities can be doing to protect Jewish, and to what do you ascribe this kind of behavior? Because I think back to when I was at ASU, something like this would have been unheard of. I mean, this just did not happen in the 1990s, or at least I don't remember it happening in the 1990s. So is this social media? To what do you attribute this? Obviously the Hamas, the Israeli
Obviously,
Hamas conflict now and what happened on October 7th, but it seems to, as Sarah pointed out, it seems to have started before that, at least a year or two before that. So, what are your thoughts? I know it's a hard question, so.
Okay, I appreciate the question. Social media definitely plays a big part. We're able to, in just a few seconds, repost an infographic, repost a statement, and not really know what it means, not really know the impact that it has. Blocked people, unfollowed people that I thought were friends. I've myself, and I'm sure many others, have kept tabs on student groups to see what they're saying, just to make sure. I keep tabs to see what their events are so that I can walk a different way to class. Just whether or not I need to do that, I don't know, but I felt I need to do that. I wouldn't necessarily attribute it to social media. I would say there is a strong want of people my age to be a part of something and to make change. I completely get that. I want to do that. Just gets a little misguided sometimes.
Thank you.
Yes, and I think what's interesting is social media has created this space where we think we're having dialogue and having conversations, and we really, part of Hillel, at least Arizona State, something we've adopted is really building global citizens, learning to question and continue to question and your own beliefs, perceptions, live in the gray a little bit more than maybe you were comfortable with. And it's interesting as we watch these student groups evolve, and we're seeing less of those conversations able to take place. And therefore, these students don't necessarily know each other. I don't know if maybe it's sheer size, you just may not interact or engage with people unless you leave that bubble that you're in as it continues to grow. And so, of course, if you were to feel uncomfortable, you're going to retreat back into your Jewish community, and therefore now we have these silos of different student groups. I also wonder about, for student government here, how can we be training student leaders accordingly? These student government senators who we know well, what support can they be getting as well in this, that they're going to be faced with this impossible situation to be even brought this type of legislation to the table, and they don't know any more than their
They're
peers.
the same age as me.
How do they navigate that as well? Is that Hillel's role? Are they receptive to us in that? That's so challenging. Do administrators know enough, because this is so complex, to be able to help advise them? We can't expect them to know everything about every issue facing any type of minority group on campus, right? It's complicated also on that front. Even though USG, the student government, made it very clear, we don't touch this type of issue. This is not something that we should be getting involved in, and they made that clear at the student government meeting.
And how are you planning to handle your future meetings? It sounds like, that night, there were people gathered outside, so chanting. In other parts of the country, I understand, or at least in one other state, there has been declared a free speech zone in front of Jewish centers, which has caused some of these issues, same types of issues. Do you have a sense of how that scenario developed, where people were throwing rocks at you, and what's your plan for the issue, please? Are you working with them? You don't have to, you don't have, and if that's too sensitive of an answer, can you just tell us that you feel as though that's being addressed?
I would say that we're trying to be as proactive as possible. And so what does that mean with the student government centers? What does it mean with their advisors? What does that mean with with ASU PD, so that we have I would say, a stronger sense of we can create a plan on what we should do in that case. I think no one knew how large that meeting was going to be, how many people we would let in. There was a lot of questions about how that meeting would be orchestrated. So if we can go in knowing exactly what that plan is, then we can prepare students accordingly. These are the guidelines we can follow. Obviously, this concern on this front of the people outside is we have no idea who else might go out to protest, and we would tell Jewish students or anyone, pro-Israel students, that we would highly encourage them to stay away. We always say, please do not engage, because we don't know what might, happen separately under some other student group or individual.
Anyway, and Rabbi, or Sarah, do you either of you want to respond to those questions or have any thoughts on that? I know it was kind of issue specific, but.
I don't stop thinking about them in general.
Okay.
Come
on up to the
truth is, this is
podium.
not a current situation. It's not even a few weeks or months before October 7th. It's not last year. I don't know how deeply you want to get into it, and certainly not from this podium at the moment. Situation can be verified going back to over 25 years. And in another session, I'm happy to go into it. I just forwarded an article on that topic to Leslie Ross. Here you see. I think these students, Ben and Taylor, spoke very, very well. Our situation is not just something that is happening now. It's deeply, deeply embedded. They talk from their perspective about students who need to feel they're part of something. I remember my idealism, 66 years old now, and it's hard for me to believe that I am. I'll deny it, even though I just said it. This is different. This is not the protest of my friends, older brothers and sisters from Vietnam, or other things that we've experienced. There are some very, very unique characteristics to what you see going on in college campuses right now. And this is a process of confusing, to my mind, free speech, exactly what you said before, what I tried to say, confusing free speech with the limits of free speech constitutionally. It's about the information, malinformation, misinformation that's predominant. It's a social media issue, but it's how social media is used. Social media is also really great for many things, too. It is very important to note that many of the instances that are going on and have been going on over the last decade on U.S. college campuses have not originated with the student bodies of those universities. They've originated with faculty who've been indoctrinated in other ways, and even more insidious, with an organization called SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine. Students for Justice in Palestine is a bad name. It's not students. The person who founded that organization is sitting in an Israeli prison for inciting both the first and the second intifadas and criminal activities against Jews worldwide and against the state of Israel. Look it up. You'll see more. They bring in busloads of people to U.S. campuses. People who are adults, who are paid oftentimes, who have nothing to do with students, nothing to do with that individual campus, and oftentimes nothing to do with that state or that jurisdiction. It's been going on for at least 25 years as part of a well-organized, master-conceived plan. It is a threat not just to the state of Israel or to the Jews in the United States and worldwide. It's a threat to the United States in general. We have to get on top of this. You know, this is Hamas and the ideas behind this. Hamas is a proxy of Iran, as is Hezbollah in the north. Hezbollah is much stronger and they're being a little smarter right now. This has been planned for years and years and years. And you should know another piece of this also. How does Hamas have such amazing intelligence to be able to infiltrate all those southern kibbutzes in the south part of Israel? Well, what they did is they killed some of the biggest left-wing peace supporters in the world when they knocked out those kibbutzes there, and the people there. Hamas, Palestinians from Gaza, who were not necessarily Hamas, may have been, worked hand in hand in the Jewish communities in southern Israel. Israelis took them to medical treatment, Israeli hospitals. They went in and they used the outlines. They knew exactly where things were weapons were kept, where people lived, where communal places were. And this is the ideology of SJP. Tunnels were not built overnight or in the last 5 years. These tunnels are underground cities where people are being held. And this is the same ideology that's being brought here. And that's why I bored you a little bit with that background. I've got a lot more. It's something I know a lot about. But yeah, this is not new. This is not recent. How do we deal with it? Strength, unity, unity of the faith communities, unity of the civil authorities in the state, and using every resource at our disposal. This is not how we're going to live. The Jews are the canary in the coal mine. We're first. The rest of America, what Iran calls big Satan, right? Our country's next. We can't allow it. This country gave me everything I needed, everything my parents needed, and I will do anything for it. Prior to being a rabbi, I taught U.S. Constitution and American history. And I have two really important books on my side. One is the U.S. Constitution, and the other is the Hebrew Bible. I believe in this with all my heart. And I imagine you have that same sentiment, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting on this council. It's much deeper than local, much deeper than ASU. And the problems are much more serious than they're much more serious than what you think. As painful as that is. Deeper than any of us know, maybe these guys are. Welcome to ask me anything else, if not, I'll sit down. Rabbis can talk a lot.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to ask us?
Well,
or should
I
we
think
proceed?
I would like to give the members of the board an opportunity to ask the speakers any questions that they have, so.
I have a question. Is there any legislative change you guys would like to see, or what initiatives are you supporting locally here in Arizona?
I'll speak from the staff perspective and ask that we could use help on. I went into Hillel work. I actually went into social work and nonprofit management because I wanted to invest in leadership development and really ensuring that the Jewish community had high-level talent and student leaders. I did not go into this work to go into into legislation. We're not the experts on that by any means. I don't know where the council could play a role in helping our students, really training them and understanding what legislation could even be started. What should they be asking of undergraduate student government that would reflect Arizona state law? What do students who are on the front lines with us need to know about free speech, hate speech? They come to us all the time saying, we're ready. Some would say, we're ready for a lawsuit. I mean, we need the support of the council on really supporting students in that arena. Happy to support on any front of any college expertise. Ask me, I probably know that one, but that's an area where, we are really thinking about as we embark in the next few weeks. Are students going to need additional support? I unfortunately hate to think about that, but are they going to need legal support, and where do we need to go for that? How do we make sure that we're set up for success if we have to pull that out of our back pocket? We tell students that's not where we want to go yet, but we know that's something that we might need to explore. So I guess part of my question back. What would you?
Legislation. I'm no expert on all that. They ask me a history question, I'll do my best. Legislation, I don't know. I think many students, like myself, want to know what's allowed, what isn't in terms of speech.
Yeah.
So I can share with you more on how certain words and certain claims make me feel. If they're allowed, I have to deal with that. If what they're saying truly is an incitement of violence, then it needs to be taken care of.
That's something we've explored. Is there something within the university that we can say these are incitements of violence, and therefore these student groups, it's now crossing that line? That's something that our students are exploring. Is there other ones? There's statements that President Crow has put out. We know that President Crow has been, producing strong statements. What else can administrators be doing to make sure that students feel safe? Is there something in legal action that can be taken for Jewish students to be protected? That I also don't know enough of, but that's a question they'd ask too.
Anything, obviously, to help protect Jewish safety, particularly on campus. And not necessarily legislation, but guidance and support for the undergraduate student government on how to handle this. They did the best they could, in my opinion, but it obviously didn't go very well.
So I actually have a meeting at 2:30 with Senator Kern. We're hoping to introduce this session. This is not real wood, but that's okay. Legislation to address swatting, and I think Billy Rabbi Sharfman mentioned that earlier. That was kind of the news of the summer, and some of it's not quite at the top of the news anymore because of what's happened since, but there were over a dozen synagogues swatted in a very short period of time, and that's when someone calls in or sends in an email of a hoax, bomb threat, or active shooter threat and induces a SWAT team response. And it's terrifying, and it happened so many times in this time period, we started to kind of recognize when it was a hoax, but law enforcement responds the same fully each time, no matter what, and we're very thankful to our law enforcement partners for that response. But it's so costly because they respond, with their full team, and they do a full sweep of the facility. And what was often happening is these individuals were targeting synagogues that had live Zoom feeds, so they would watch like the people in the service evacuate, and then they would watch the SWAT team enter the synagogue, and they would be chatting and laughing and just like watching it all happen. And so other states, ADL has helped introduce swatting legislation, which right now in Arizona, the only statute that really addresses this is false reporting, and a misdemeanor is like the highest. I mean, it's a misdemeanor statute, and so we're looking to expand to include a felony charge when it targets a religious institution or a school or an educational setting. So that is happening. I'm going to go soon to talk about that, and we'll see. But we'd love to talk to you more about that and possible success in that. And the second piece of legislation we've considered is hate crime legislation. Arizona doesn't have a hate crime statute. Other states do. There's obviously reasonable concerns about expanding the criminal code in that way, and we wanted to do more community engagement on that issue before just introducing hate crime legislation to see where people are with that. I think now, that's something that could be useful when you have rocks being thrown at Jewish students, like that kind of statutory language might be really applicable, but that's probably not something we would look to introduce until 25, but I wanted to mention it because it exists many other places in the state.
Any other questions from board members? Judge Barry on the Zoom, does she have any questions before we move on?
And Madam Chair, I just did want to also note for the record that the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division is represented here today, as is the FBI. So they are present.
Thank you. All right.
I would like to now take the agenda a little bit out of order to give an opportunity for call to the public at this time before the board sort of gets to our substantive agenda items. Is there anyone in the room who would like to address the board? Wonderful. Thank you. Just briefly before we start the call to the public, I'm going to read my little call to the public script. This is the time for public comment. Members of the board may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda, and therefore pursuant to ARS 38-431-01H. Action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration at a later date. And we are, because we're sort of short on time, we're going to limit comments to 2 minutes. I see that our first speaker, and the only person in the room who's asked to speak, is Bennett Cooper, who, keeping Bennett Cooper to 2 minutes could be quite interesting, but please come forward.
I'm Chairman, Attorney General May, members of the board. I'm head of security at Bethel Congregation on Glendale Avenue. I never thought I'd have that title. I was the ritual vice president and the past president. But now, instead of reading Torah, the congregation, I stand outside on guard. I'm a member of an organization that trains to provide armed security for Jewish sites throughout the city. That's unheard of, but it didn't start on October 7th. It started, frankly, for us with Tree of Life, Sylvania, Poway, Muncie, Fort Worth. And it's not just synagogues, it's churches and other houses of worship. We cooperate with the Arizona Church Security Network. It's scary that when I have to recruit members of my synagogue, it's not for simply asking them to be involved in ritual or social matters. It's to create security teams using terms law enforcement would be familiar with. You know, contact and cover. What's concealment? What's cover on a campus? What do we do in the case of threats? We embrace and love the officers who serve on Saturday mornings with us, if we can get them, because on the day of rage, we couldn't get police officers. They were in short supply. So we had an armed security officer in the back, and I stood guard at the front on walkie-talkies. When you start worrying about, you know, wearing a security hat inside the synagogue and being on the walkie-talkie app, and the congregants have come to recognize that I'm going to be there wearing a walkie-talkie and communicating with the officers up front. Now, this didn't used to happen. It didn't happen on campuses. As the Attorney General noted, I go back to the 80s. If Congressman Jamie Raskin were here, he would tell you that he was the head of the left wing and I was head of the right wing when we were classmates at college, and there were often raucous political debates. But there were no threats, there was no intimidation. There was none of the things. And I realize that the Supreme Court has made it, with their recent decisions on true threats, very difficult to prosecute people short of what the Supreme Court calls true threat. But there are conduct codes on campuses that needs to be enforced. Jews should not be snuck out the back door. You know, kids in Little Rock went in the front door. And it's a shame that we have to consider this now. But there should not be rocks thrown. It should not be a matter of responsibility.
Thank you. Do we have people who are joining via Zoom who would like to speak? Oh, okay. So if you are on the Zoom and you would like to speak, please click the little hand raise icon, and we will hopefully be able to locate you and unmute you. All right, we got at least a couple. Go ahead, Amir.
Hello, my name is Amir Lodo, and I'm an Israeli who have lived here in town for the past 12 years, and part of a local group that is called Phoenix, Arizona Phoenix, Israel Situation Desk. We've done in the past few weeks multiple events to raise awareness to the hostage situation and also bring the Jewish community together. And I'm a 57-year-old, served in the military in Israel, and have felt comfortable everywhere in the world until these past few weeks. And I see protests in front of my house. It's happening inside colleges at U of A, Arizona State University, high school here. And I'm very concerned. I actually want to share a photo I took outside of my house of the same Palestinian Justice Organization protesting from the river to the sea, which is a triggering statement, as some of you may be aware, and ceasefire. And there is really very imbalanced dynamic here. Now, I understand the value of the freedom of speech, but I also feel very strongly that there is a need for clarity on and creating boundaries before this situation gets escalated beyond measure. And I think, you know, three ways. One is related to education. We heard the superintendent press conference where he stated that he's unable to force principals of schools. And I think this is where you guys may be very instrumental in providing some more guidance around education in schools, and what kind of curriculum school supports. The second is obviously around different protests with face covers and with certain energy to it that I understand hard to sometimes define, but it's very much needed. So that's my request today.
Thank you. Right. Our next speaker.
Go ahead and unmute Jacob.
Hope
Thank
everyone
you.
can hear. Hope everyone can hear me. Good afternoon,
We
Attorney
can.
General. Good afternoon, Attorney General Mays and members of the Arizona Civil Rights Advisory Board. My name is Jacob Morrison, and I'm a Jewish student at Arizona State University and also serve as the Government Affairs Director with Undergraduate Student Government Tempe. I just want to thank you guys for meeting today to deal with these concerns, and hope to good, productive future meetings on this issue with how USG can help better protect Jewish students in the future. And so, yeah, I just came on here to say thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Do we have anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for the members of the public who addressed us. We appreciate it very much. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is discussion and possible action to create a subcommittee. This board has the ability to create subcommittees to study specific issues. So I would like to sort of throw it out there to see what the members of the board think about putting together a subcommittee to study the rise in hate crimes, hate speech, certainly anti-Semitism, but hate crimes against other groups as well. So I will open the floor to the members of the board to see what you'd like to say about it.
Well, I'll just say I see two needs. I definitely think that there needs to be some sort of study and proposed legislation or research in that area regarding hate crimes. I also see a need for some sort of community engagement in terms of providing some sort of service regarding what is true freedom of speech versus hate speech. It sounds like there's a need throughout the community, particularly on the universities. I see those two needs at a minimum. The safety concerns, I think, are also an issue.
And I agree with Tara. The only thing I always come back to is our statutory charter is one of civil rights, and obviously, the Attorney General's got a competent criminal, division that can assist with the coordinating the efforts statewide to clamp down on true criminal activity. I would be interested in seeing a subcommittee at least to discuss the free speech on campus. I started out as a constitutional lawyer. I litigated for students' rights on campus, and finding what was lawful and what was unlawful, and even in the early 2000s for me was that's when I was a lawyer anyway, was always tricky to determine what universities could do with very unpopular speech. And of course now we're seeing the extent to which unpopular speech, or even just the pure exercise of religion on campus, can trigger in response. And I would be very interested in seeing both seeing us serve as a subcommittee, perhaps not just an isolated subcommittee, but working with anyone else that the Attorney General's office has got working on this particular issue, and maybe not limiting it to just board members in that respect.
Anything?
Yeah, I think similar to what we did with service animals, on the educate side, I think we should definitely have a subcommittee to study and report and educate our audience, our community, whether it's an infographic of some sort, hate speech versus free speech, some type of marketing document similar to what we just recently accomplished. I think if we had that could be passed around the communities coming from the Attorney General's office, that'd be very useful.
Thank you. All right.
I would like, this is.
Oh, Judge Barry. Please.
I think it's a good idea for us to have a subcommittee, but I think we need to collaborate with some other groups, whether it is one of the organizations that spoke with us, or the security from ASU, or the ASU Student Association. I think we need more information so that we can, what our subcommittee comes up with is something solid that really addresses the issue. So I really think it's a good idea for us to do that, but I think we need more collaboration to really be effective.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I would agree with that. I mean, and I do think that this report should be wider than just the universities. I think that obviously is obviously a flashpoint right now, but you know, anti-Semitism and hate seems to be on the rise everywhere. So I would be interested in this being sort of a little bit wider than that. I also think somebody raised the hate crime, the lack of a hate crime statute. I think that's something that we should take a look at. You know, what kinds of additional laws need to be passed to help us as the law enforcement side of this, because I do think they're intertwined. You know, obviously they're intertwined. If Ben is having to be his own law enforcement, and synagogues are having to provide their own, essentially their own security forces. And Nick can speak to this, but this office has been trying to prosecute some of these cases for a while. Nick can speak to it. Our efforts in 2018 when the JCC in Tucson experienced a bomb threat. But you know, to the degree that we can speak to additional additions to the criminal code that would help the Attorney General's office and law enforcement prosecute these cases, from my standpoint and what I've tried to do, whether it's this issue or pushing back on those who would undermine our democracy, we want to send a message that if you attack someone who is Jewish for being Jewish, or someone who is Muslim for being Muslim, we're gonna prosecute you. If you threaten them, if you engage in violence against a community because of who they are, you will be prosecuted for that. But I do think that some of those statutory enhancements might be necessary. Nick, do you want to speak?
Sure, I think when I hear stories about needing to be your own security guard, to threats, or concerns about going to synagogue, or can't participate in community groups on campus, for example, I think there are gaps in the law, and this office, I know in particular, has prosecuted when free speech crosses the line to the true threat. We've done bomb threats, and it's a frustrating area in the law where the resources, Rabbi, that you mentioned that go into private security across the state are disheartening from a law enforcement perspective, and I think it's the more we could do to shed light on that and push for real reforms for hate crimes is valuable in our state. And I think that is something that's long overdue, a gap in our law that needs to be done. And hopefully, I've laid some groundwork in the past when we rewrote the terrorism statutes in 2018, started talking about having swatting as a crime, because that's a real problem as well, and especially if it's now affecting people's ability to practice religion or participate or whatever it is. That's a concern from a law enforcement and community perspective. I think there's value in being able to present that package to our legislature and underscore the need for some real reforms in that area.
I agree. Like when that comes to what we can do as a board, based on what I'm hearing, it's impacting their ability to enjoy these religious facilities, to enjoy the campuses. And I think that is where we can step in. But that's very concerning. If students don't feel safe to walk to class or to walk to some sort of gathering, that's disturbing, at least.
And I also agree, I don't know if Tara was you or who said it, but definitely we should include Department of Justice, the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, all of whom are also giving a lot of thought to this and doing some really good work around it, so the degree that the subcommittee could work with those entities as well and invite them in, I think that would be great.
Maybe a question for staff. Have we seen any uptick in charges or complaints of discrimination in employment related to ethnic or religious affiliation after October, by any chance? Or is it too early to tell? I don't want to put you on the spot. Okay.
They have a or people feel like it's covered. File the questionnaire with the office. In employment.
Moses is the infographic guy. I tend to wonder if it would be useful to put out one, tailored even just to this issue from October 7th that basically says, I mean, it's not a lawyer billboard, but you know what I'm talking about. Just have you been targeted at work as a result of your faith recently, or we can leave it generic or we can be specific. I don't think we are limited in that regard, but just a reminder that the Civil Rights Division is out there for something like that. I wonder if we could at least have that as an output for at least for a short-term thing.
I think it's something that the subcommittee could absolutely work on. I mean, a part of our job here is to educate and communicate these things, and I think a lot of people aren't aware of some of the terms and topics that we talked about today. And it's not just students on campus, I think it's your general public. And we're gonna have a lot of eyes on Arizona next year with an election year. What better time to educate the community on some of these topics as they come up?
Great. I think so. in my effort to keep us to the agenda, I think, do we have a motion to create a subcommittee of the board to address the important issue of hate crimes in our community, and to further study the issue, come up with recommendations, and possible solutions to address the problems that we heard about today?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I don't think you're allowed to.
I was gonna second you, Terry, so let's.
Thank you. So, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries. Okay. And this was touched on already in some of the discussion that has gone on, but we do have a second action item on the agenda. We have discussion and possible action to develop a joint community event between the Attorney General's Office, the Civil Rights the Civil Rights Advisory Board, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and any other, law enforcement and community partners. Does anyone have anything else that they would like to add
What
to
if
that?
they let us host it at ASU? Be an interesting location for a community event, especially where we're at right now. Maybe we have one in Tempe and one in Tucson, if it comes to that. That's my initial thought. I would welcome the opportunity to hear from the enforcement aspect of what this really looks like, kind of boots on the ground from the different agencies that are tasked with having to do the very difficult job of respecting the boundary of free speech and still prosecuting crimes. The single hardest distinction when you're talking about campuses, which are the robust birthplace of free expression, they're supposed to have robust dialogue. Protests are a university staple, and yet we don't want to see people victimized because of who they are or what they believe. So I would definitely support the idea of a joint community event. Again, I guess we can't require it to be at the university or anything, but it surely would be a good opportunity for us to go there and see and hear with our own eyes what's going on at that level.
Any other thoughts from the board? Judge Barry?
I think it sounds like a good idea. I think that anytime you can collaborate, that is always more effective. So, and maybe we can think about, including others in this conversation, but I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. Moses, Tara?
I'm on board.
Okay, all right. Well, in that case, do we have a motion to develop a joint community event between the Attorney General's Office, the Civil Rights Advisory Board, the Department of Justice and the FBI, and other community organizations, law enforcement organizations, to gather information and, work on the process of educating?
Yes, I'll motion for that.
Yeah, and I guess I would ask before I would be willing to second that, can we table for further discussion the full list of people we would want to involve in terms of participating in developing the event? Not looking to exclude anyone that you've already listed, but maybe to add to the list.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Do we need to look at my lawyer over there? Do we need to restate the motion?
Need a motion?
My friendly amendment would be just that the motion be to develop a joint community event between the groups listed on the agenda and potentially others.
Okay, so do we have a second to that amended motion?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 That's right, all right. That motion carries. Thank you very much. Last item on the agenda is adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.